average score on the SAT, might not fully understand every single concept, and they might only know about like 3/4 of the test's entirety. But on the questions that they don't know, they just guess on the question. They don't have any strategy to actually figure out what should they do in that scenario and what are the things they can do to increase their chances of getting that question correct. Now, a 1600 score, even though they might fully understand every single concept and every question and have a full mastery of the SAT and what it's like, there is the rare case that they come upon the question that they just don't understand how to approach it. It's just something so new that they haven't seen before, right? So in that scenario, right, the 1600 score has this thing in place, right? A failsafe, you would say, a strategy that they implement to increase the percentage accuracy of the question that they like do not fully understand and that they're guessing on. They know certain things about the SAT that can help boost their score. Right? So you already know the basics of testing. You've probably been testing for the last 10 years of your life. You've been taking standardized tests ever since you were like 6 years old, right? So I don't need to tell you about things like process of elimination and like basic skills of testing, like read the answer choices and, come up with the answer like before you read the choices. Like you already know all of that information, right? But what are some things that are applicable specifically to the SAT that you might not know about? Right? What are some things that SAT does that could help you get questions that you don't know correct by like guessing and using these methods, right? I remember being a student and, taking the SAT, watching SAT videos just like this, but there was things in the SAT that were specific to them, and you could use those strategies to like benefit or boost your score, let's say. But just imagine like you're watching a video like this and you just get the same repetitive information that's just total garbage of just basics of testing, things that you already know. You can't find any useful information. And I was just so frustrating that I had to come up with this myself. So I'm here to share that information with you today. All right. I'm Karthik. These are 3 last-minute tips for really difficult questions. All right. So first, I'm going to go into a disclaimer, right? You should know when to apply these and when you shouldn't. So basically, I'm going to go ahead and tell you like the specific skill of like finding out that question. And I'm going to tell you about that question in perspective with the skill, right? So the skill of like what specific thing I use to differentiate from hard questions and when you implement it. But on top of that, right, most importantly, you should know that this is not your first like attempt, right? Their first attempt to solve a question should be just knowing the question and fully understanding it. It should not be using this method. Using this method is not going to get you a good answer, right? This method is a fail-safe for when you don't know how to solve the problem at all, and you should know the concept behind the question in order to like guarantee your success on that question, right? So knowing the concept is just going to be way more effective, like knowing the question and not having to do this guessing method. But this method is still important because you need to have this fail-safe to know, and this can actually help you like guarantee your correct answers that you might not be fully sure of. Okay, so my first, I guess, method in order to do this is elimination on similarity. So answer choices that are phrased the same or have similar meanings, right? You might be in a reading passage and you're reading a passage that has like the question answers. There's like 4 choices. 2 of them sound extremely similar. Like they sound pretty much like the same thing. There's no key. They might be slightly different in like terms of severity of the words that they use, but they still generally mean the same thing. And they have no unique differences that make them like completely different from each other based on some detail in the passage. So if you know that's the case, you have 2 very similar answer choices, it's not possible that you can pick both of them, right? So just based on that logic, it can't be both of those answers. It can't be both of those answers because they're too similar, and you can't have 2 extremely similar answers be on the SAT. There has to be some differentiating detail. So if you do have 2 similar answers, you can eliminate them immediately, right? But watch out for this hidden detail that's going to be in one of them, right? If you have some detail that's added on to one of them that's not in both, right, that might actually be a reason why one of those is incorrect and one of those is right, right? So like the 2 good answer choice like scenario that you often come across on the SAT. So be careful for that one key detail that might make this invalid. So you have to make sure that there isn't any major difference, but there are questions that have like 2 answer choices that are extremely similar, and you'll be able to use this method. And also the similarity of the questions, like of the answer choice, has to be extremely similar. Like they have to be very close in definition for this to work, right? Similar to what I just said previously. Okay. So guessing on shared portions, right? And this is most applicable to the math section because you're really only ever going to see this in numbers. So imagine you have a question, right? And it's like, what is this graph? And you don't know the graph. It's like a line graph with y equals mx plus b, and you have a slope and you have a y-intercept. And those are the only differences between the answer choices, right? But now imagine that two of the slope intercepts are the same in one of the questions, and two of them are the same slope, right? And then there's a third one with a different slope and a different intercept, right? So there's one of these formulas, right? One of these linear equation graphs that has both the slope and the intercept of the repeated choices above and below it. Now, if you have an answer choice like that, right? Like a linear equation graph where they repeat the y-intercept in multiple answer choices. They repeat a slope in multiple answer choices. And there's an answer choice that has both the repeated slope and intercept. That might be the correct answer, right? Because you might have gotten one of them but gotten another one wrong, and the SAT wants to trick you. So you can actually guess correctly most of the time that the answer choice with the shared portions of the other answer choices is the most correct answer, right? But there's also an exception to this rule. You can actually eliminate based on shared portion, right? And even though there's an extremely high chance that the answer choice with the most shared portions is correct, right? Based on my knowledge and me taking the SAT, that was what I found was the most correct most of the time. But the choice that's the most unique, the choice that doesn't include that slope or intercept, could also be correct. And that's actually significantly more rare, but I don't see people talking about it, and it's still possible. So know that that's possible, and you could pick that answer potentially, right? So you have to eliminate between both of them, but it is a higher chance that the one with the highest shared portions of answers, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be like slopes and intercepts, right? It could just be like some other math equation, but the one that has the most shared portions is generally going to be correct, right? But how do you differentiate between, if you're having a tough time doing so? You have to use your intuition. Use your basic knowledge of whatever you have, right? Try to extract every piece of knowledge from that question that you do know, right? If you don't know it completely, then you have to pick the one that's the higher chance. But if you know like a little bit, like maybe you do know the slope, maybe you do know the intercept, maybe you do know like what the graph of the equation is supposed to look like, use that. That is the best thing. Like, as I said before, using the information that you know is going to help you, right? More than any of these techniques. Okay, so eliminating on extreme language. This is most applicable to reading and grammar because, that's the only one with words as the answer choices. Like any like sort of scientific passage, like those are like extremely key on this. So you're going to get answer choices that have like phrasing like always, must be, never, right? And those answers are almost always incorrect. Just think about that. Why would that be the case? Well, can we really guarantee that something is going to happen a certain way forever, always? No, you can't really guarantee that. There's almost always an exception, right? So that's why anything that uses extreme language, if you're like eliminating based on the process choice, then there's almost always an exception. And you can never really use that strong language anywhere in the reading passage. It would be almost inaccurate to say. So just know that that's a thing that could happen to you, and you're going to realize that extreme language is not the case. So those questions are almost always incorrect. Now, all those tips that I talked about that I've seen in videos that are very basic test taking tips, I realize that not all of you might have fully encountered those. So I'm just going to go through them really quick, and they're all very simple, and I think that you could also benefit from them, right? So if you don't fully understand the question, reread it word for word. Put your pencil to the paper and just try to extract every single word, because you might have messed up a word or something, and that led you to not know how to solve the question, right? Highlight what the question actually asked for, right? So the question might be some basic algebra like 2x equals 4, but then the question says, what is 2x, right? So instead of you solve for x, but the answer choice is actually what 2x is, not what x is, right? So solve for, like, highlight the specific portion that asks you, like, what is the answer choice actually asking you for, right? What is the question asking you to solve? Is it asking you to solve the problem, or is it asking you to solve like a version of the problem? Like I just said with my 2x and my x example, right? Answer the question before reading all the answer choices. So this is applicable to like reading or grammar, but if you have like a main idea question, without reading the answer choices, try to figure out what the right answer is. Because if you figure out what the right answer is and it matches up to the answer choice, that's the most correct one. Like, because you already knew it beforehand. So obviously process of elimination, but even more than that, use any information that you do know, right? Like I talked about in the previous example, your intuition is best. Use any information you do know to assist your process of elimination, and that actually makes this one of the most powerful techniques. Your intuition plus process of elimination can actually get you correct answers most of the time. And memorize all of this, right? Memorize these basic tips right here and the tips that I've given through these video, and now you have a proper plan for any time you get a question incorrect. Use this in your practice test. Practice using this, and you're going to get really good at it. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned something today.